right, this section is probably the toughest for what we have been talking about. The Torah, the law of Moses, and the law of Christ. Why? Well, because Jesus is as clear as he can be. He says, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in what he calls the chair of Moses. Now, whether that's a literal chair, it doesn't really matter, because the point is, verse 3, right? Do whatever they tell you and keep it. So why is that a problem? Well, because Jesus, as we have been reading, has contradicted at times some of the laws of Moses. So you have Matthew 12, where he says, Jesus, my apostles break the Sabbath, yet are innocent. And then he makes the big declaration, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. In other words, he owns it. He can keep the Sabbath if he wants to. He doesn't have to keep the Sabbath if he doesn't want to. It's like when you own a car, right? I can drive it when I want to. So I think that's clear. Let's look at the seat of Moses. Do what they say, not what they do. That's really the moral here of the story. Do what they say, not what they do. Now, Jesus' recognition is of their authority here, but just because he recognized them as being an authority, right, it doesn't necessarily imply that he endorses everything they teach. In Matthew 16 we read, Jesus said, beware the yeast, the hypocritical teachings, perhaps, of the Pharisees. That's Matthew 16, right? And we know that Jesus did not reject Torah wholesale. Again, Matthew 5:17, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. So there's Torah keeping for us Christians. The Shema is at the core of Torah keeping, right? But which Torah is the question? So we say it's the Torah of Jesus, of Christ. And then we have the Shema, like I said, Mark 12. And listen to this in Matthew 19:17. We read, Jesus said, if you want to enter into life, if you want to become immortal, keep the commandments. Therefore, all things here in this passage where Jesus says, do whatever they say, or all things they say, it has to be read within that context, that wider context of what Jesus is doing to the law, the Torah at times, what he's saying about the Pharisees at times, and we have the woes coming up. So the all things doesn't mean the whole law, the whole system of Mosaic teaching. Again, Jesus did not come to abolish Torah wholesale, but rightly practice and teach it. So the moral here is that Jesus recognizes the teaching and position, the authority of these Pharisees, but as usual, critiques their hypocrisy. And most importantly, legalism. He will go on to say, Jesus, you guys go to the ends of the world to make proselytes, to convert, yet you're hypocrites because you put on them burdens which you yourselves don't want to carry. And that results in the so-called woes that follow. And it's a transitionary period as well. Jesus bringing in new teachings. Remember the food laws you mentioned earlier from Mark 7. They didn't get it at the time. So does that mean when Jesus said, no food makes you unclean in Mark 7:15, does that mean his apostles got it and stopped following kosher? So here it's the same situation. I think that Jesus, again, just because he recognizes the authority they had sitting on the seat of Moses, that shouldn't necessarily mean that he endorsed Sabbath keeping, because he just said that you can break the Sabbath and you can be innocent. So it has to be, again, taken within the scope of the wider testimony of Matthew here. Look at the Matthew 5, right? 5:17 is a favorite of Sabbatarians. That's the go-to. Jesus said he didn't come to abolish. You're saying he abolished Sabbath? The Sabbath. That's it. But look at what he goes on to say, Jesus. He contradicts the penal system established by God under Torah when he says, love your enemies. Unqualified statement. And then he talks about adultery in Matthew 5. It comes to the heart, not so much the action. And then we know that he encounters the adulterer, he doesn't stone her. So he goes on, even in Matthew 5, to contradict at times the very law he said he did not come to abolish. So how is that? Some of the Torah, the Old Covenant law, Jesus is sometimes doing away with, sometimes what we call spiritualizes it. Look at the Matthew 5. I forgot about this one. The oaths. He says don't swear by anyone. Oaths are Torah commandments. Make your oaths to the altar, make your oaths to the priest, make your oaths to God. And Jesus says, do not take an oath, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Does away with the oaths there. And then we read about the temple tax. Peter comes running and says, hey, Jesus, they're asking me, did we pay the temple tax? And then he tells them about a kingdom story. The sons of the kingdom are free, but so we do not offend them. And that's a weird thing for a Torah-keeping Jesus to say. So we don't offend our fellow Torah-keeping Jews? Pay it. Again, if you can show me how this statement of Jesus in Matthew 23, therefore do whatever they tell you and keep it, is not contradicting, it's not making you make Jesus a lawbreaker, a sinner then, which is what we're accused of doing, by the way. They're accusing us of, certainly accusing me of teaching that Jesus was a lawbreaker, therefore a sinner, and these are fellow Christians telling me this.